I once told somebody that YouTube is a conservative domain, and that person didn't agree with me. But I just came across a little discussion between David Pakman and Kyle Kulinski, or is it Kuklinski? The Secular Talk guy. I never remember how to pronounce his name. Anyway, those guys were talking about how an article had come out saying sort of my initial suspicion that the domains in YouTube are overwhelmingly conservative. However, they were sort of showing some evidence to the contrary. They were saying that, a channel like Steven Crowder's might have more subscribers. And I think as of now, Crowder has more than 2 million subscribers, whereas those guys have just under 600,000. They're like, conservative channels seem to get more subscribers, but it is the progressive channels that actually get more total views. For example, they were saying that those channels, they have with 500,000, 600,000 subscribers, have a larger number of views than Crowder's entire channel. And you also aren't able to monetize solely based on subscribers. They did point out one thing to me. Well, before I say that, I should say that something really didn't sit well with me once they gave that sort of statement about, the largest total views. So stay with me. There's something to say about that. But one of the things that they did raise to our attention is the Young Turks actually have more views than any other news outlet on all of YouTube and all of almost all online media, period. And I think they're like the largest solely internet-based news organization in the world. They've overtaken RT. And InfoWars was actually a very large one, but they've since been deplatformed. But yeah, the Young Turks had over 3 billion total views on all their uploads. Now, there is a big thing to say about this. For starters, one of the things, I don't know how they factored this in, but a guy like Steven Crowder puts out 50-minute videos sometimes, there are only 2 genders, change my mind. A video that's like 50 minutes long, and he can get 15 million views. That's not exactly an easy thing to do. I was even listening to a YouTuber once, and he's just like, yeah, sorry, this video's never going to go viral, because he was doing like an hour-long podcast segment on YouTube, or a vodcast, I guess we would have to call it, with video, and he's just like, it's never going to go viral, but it is not an easy thing to get 50-minute videos with 15 million views, especially for just a YouTuber. We're not talking about somebody who has, Disney Studios, or even someone with the capabilities of CNN. I don't know if David Pakman or Kyle Kulinski, I'm going to go with that pronunciation, Kyle Kulinski, have any videos with 15 million views. So you definitely can see there's definitely this larger concentration. Well, how do you explain that? My sort of initial hypothesis is kind of like, guys like Pakman and Secular Talk, they divide up more of their content into smaller segments. They have loads of videos that are 3 minutes long with 70,000 views, and they do this just non-stop. If you ever were to put in, David Pakman Show into your search bar, you're just going to be constantly seeing things uploaded 3 hours ago, 5 hours ago. They're just unloading lots of 3-minute clips with clickbait titles. And if that gives you more total views, bring it on. That's a good business model. All right, that's fine. But I definitely notice there are definitely larger concentrations around channels like Steven Crowder that we mentioned. Also, other people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson would be another example of that. Jordan Peterson's channel gets, 300,000 views or something pretty easily on the rather lengthy clips. So I definitely find that there are larger amounts of concentration on the conservative side, whereas on the liberal side, it's really just because they cut up a lot of their segments into very small clips so they can get more clicks, more views, and all of that. Moreover, with a channel like Steven Crowder, I think a lot of people tune in probably only for the Change My Mind segments. I don't think I've ever watched anything from him that was not that. Do you remember Steven Crowder, though, 10 years ago? I was shocked when I saw him, do something other than, bad comedy. He dressed up as a guy named Not Muhammad, and he just was telling bad jokes, and, everyone was just like, it would have been nice if this had been funny, but it's not. It was just, really weird, and he dressed up and pretended to be Keith Olbermann, and once again, it was just, very, very awkward comedy attempts, but it somehow had a studio budget, so we didn't really know what was going on with him. But, he exploded onto the internet. And we've seen the rise of the entire intellectual dark web. Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Stefan Molyneux, Sargon of Akkad. These guys have, it really feels like a larger following. Well, how do you explain the progressive channels getting more views than these guys that everybody's talking about? Well, that's just it. The progressive channels get their views because they talk about the IDW. They only get their views because of clickbait titles that are associated with the IDW. Like, whether it's the Majority Report or some of the other guys we mentioned, the Young Turks. I mean, the first time I ever heard of the Young Turks, it was because, I was trying to listen to Rush Limbaugh, and they actually just had, a clip discussing Rush Limbaugh, and then I guess I got started on a bad note with them. I'm not like some extreme right-winger. I'm pretty, down the center or independent, whatever you want to call it. But it's like, just any time I would try to watch something, I would always be like, oh shit, I clicked the Young Turks by mistake. I just want to hear the damn clip. I don't need your crappy commentary. I mean, and that was true. They used a lot of clickbait titles to get your attention based on the fame of other people who would happen to be conservative. But it's a very large question that we really just want to explore when it comes to everything associated with, the intellectual dark web. How did this get so big? Furthermore, is there an IPW? Is there an intellectual progressive web? Is there an ILW, an intellectual light web? I mean, really, what's going on? What I can sort of say about this, and this is a big question, mind you. This is a very big question. I mean, a lot of people are really just trying to understand, why are more people tuning into the IDW? Why are there more conservative talk radio stations? It's really just sort of a mystery. But I have a few things that I would like to say. The biggest thing that I think deals with talk radio is, for starters, it's kind of easier to present things from the conservative talking points. I mean, this the sort of energy that the host builds up behind it might have one thing to do with it. But, in reality, liberal and progressive news outlets use a different kind of outreach. They aren't only about talk radio. I wake up to about 15 emails every day from progressive groups, whether it's Some of Us, 1ONE, or Our Revolution. I mean, there are so many of them that just are using email chains, newsletters, and I get very, very few from conservative sites. I mean, even Senator Jeff Merkley sends me emails. I'm not from Oregon, and I have to, at least delete that stuff. I used to read it because that's how it was the first time I actually found out about him. So we have this thing that's going on. Liberals use kind of a different way to use their outreach. It isn't only centered on talk radio. But when I said that the hosts are a little bit more engaging, well, I was listening to some stuff from the IDW, like, a little bit of Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and Stefan Molyneux, and then I thought, I've been listening to way too much of that stuff. I need something different. So, I just need something that's also a bit more optimistic, because even the stuff from Steven Crowder or something, or definitely from someone like Sargon of Akkad, after a while, it just becomes a little bit frustrating. It's just, it's very, very emotionally intense stuff, and I was just like, I want to listen to something just lighter. So I found a podcast called This Is Love Podcast, or some name like that. I hope I'm getting the name right. This Is Love Podcast. And I was like, let's listen to something different. And I could listen to that for about 10 minutes before I'm just like, okay, that's enough. When everything is just like, be nice, be helpful, be optimistic. And it's just like, you can only listen to that for so long before you're just like, I've had enough. So that's what I mean when I say that the conservative and the IDW hosts build up a different kind of energy, where it's like, it's not so light when it just becomes like a giant monotone. And it's true, it really is. It really is, But there's another progressive talk show host, Tom Hartman, who is quite different than some of the other people I mentioned, like the Young Turks or the Majority Report. Tom Hartman is definitely coming from a more intellectual perspective. And I was actually hearing him talk about, the reasons why talk radio was leaning toward conservative sides, and now we have YouTube. But he said talk radio actually happened because Rush Limbaugh, back in the 1980s, when he first came on the scene, he had 3 years when he was really trying to climb up in the ratings. And Rush Limbaugh became very successful. He succeeded. And then a lot of people thought, well, what is a way that we can make our station succeed? So they just copied that model, and they would put on similar hosts, conservative talk radio hosts that had, almost a similar personality to Rush Limbaugh. Well, I think there might be some truth to that, when he's almost like, this kind of model just works. And some people sort of say that conservatives want to hear more repetitive things. They just want to hear the same old bashing of a particular group. I don't really know what to make of that, because I tune into a lot of conservatives. I'm not a conservative myself, but I definitely like to listen to them and hear what they have to say. There's also Howard Stern's, book/movie Private Parts, when they hear that people that did not like Howard Stern listened to him, twice as long, more or less, I forget the exact figures, but twice as long, if not longer, than people who were actual fans of him, because they wanted to know what he was going to say next. And it's very similar when you have things like the IDW, when you have things, like the conservative talk radio. You just kind of want to know who is this person and what do they have to say. And now they become very famous, and you definitely listen to the clips from the Majority Report because you want to hear what they have to say about Jordan Peterson or about Sam Harris or about Ben Shapiro. Because I think it's very natural in our human nature to also get different sides of it. I would say one thing. Conservatives definitely seem to be much more active when it comes to things like dislike ratios. I think conservatives are much more active when it comes to the comment sections on things. I don't necessarily have an answer for that why, but that's been a definitive observation. During the 2016 election, all of Hillary Clinton's videos were absolutely ravaged by people who were opposed to her. And they should have been opposed to her because she sucked, but the thing is, the Democrats weren't on the other side watching Donald Trump's videos, giving him dislikes and writing any comments at all. They were just ignoring him. So it's I definitely think conservatives are more active when it comes to the like-dislike ratios. And also, we have the YouTube algorithm, and I was listening to Ezra Klein one day, and he had a guest on, and I can't pronounce her name either. I'm not a name person. I mean, her name was Zainab Tefeki or something like that. And she was saying that the YouTube algorithm actually leans toward things that are slowly more intense because it's designed actually with human psychology to keep you watching. No matter what you watch, you will always get something more intense, more extreme in your suggested videos. If you watch a video from CNN, maybe it will then show you a video about, some type of far-right or far-left group. Or, to give a more honest answer, if you listen to something conservative, then it will suggest far-right content. If you listen to something liberal, then it will suggest far-left content. And, it's I really find, though, if you watch even anything religious, then it suggests something about atheism. And by religious, I mean Mostly, if you just watch something related to Christianity, then it will suggest something about atheism. I don't really find that when we're listening to things like about Hinduism or Buddhism or, any religion that comes from the Far East or South Asia, anything like that. I find that there's that sort of in its own class of it. It's in its own sort of realm. I really feel that there are not a lot of discussions going on about that. Moreover, that's an entire topic on itself. It's why is there so little discussion on that stuff? Well, I think the reason why, videos about religion that are coming from, traditionally non-European origins, the only people that are watching that stuff are the ones who are genuinely curious and just want to know more, as opposed to people who are looking to challenge it. I mean, I know very few people who challenge Hinduism at all. I know Matt Dillahunty did a video on it about 10 years ago or something like that, and I mean, Sam Harris even praises Buddhists and Jains. I mean, people don't really just watch that type of content to try and find, what am I going to argue against this? What am I going to argue against the existence of Rama? You know, it's like, I think we're programmed a little bit differently. But I should say, though, I said, religions that are traditionally non-European, but, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all of those are from the Middle East. Some things that would be European in origin would actually be like Greeks and Romans, Jupiter and Zeus, and so on. But that's one of the big things that we do deal with. YouTube tries to push us to content that is more extreme. It tries to push us toward content that is always getting more intense. It's like a friend that's trying to provoke you into doing something, or just to introduce you into a new school of thought. Does that mean that YouTube is overwhelmingly conservative? Well, what I can say is, YouTube is probably overwhelmingly male, and that was one of Jordan Peterson's contributions, at least to me anyway. I had never heard anyone present it like that when he was saying that YouTube is a male domain and Tumblr is a female domain. For example, during some of his lectures, like I took the whole Maps of Meaning course that he has online, and it's like, he was saying that his audience on YouTube is 80% male, 20% female. This was back in 2016 when he said that. Are right-wing and conservative things more popular with men? It's possible, but overall, I mean, how many conservative women do you know in your life? I can name a lot. I mean, like, when you're counting in social media, I mean, yes, I mean, like, I know, of course there are lots of women. That's one of the big mistakes that the Democrats did make in 2016, why Hillary Clinton is not our president. Because they just assumed that women were not conservatives. And you might think that I sound crazy for talking about this, but that's what happened. They just thought that all women were going to be voting for Hillary because she's a woman, or that Hillary was going to get a majority of the female vote because she was women. She was going to get a majority of the Latino vote, and the black vote, and, any vote that was not the white male vote. But guess what? That didn't happen, because people are somewhat open-minded. We're free-thinking individuals. Even if, someone has a different political viewpoint than you, we make our own decisions, and we don't have to vote just one way because of our demographics, because of our religion, or because of our skin color. So that was a very, very naive move made by the Hillary Clinton campaign. She rigged the election and she lost. She lost a rigged election. For goodness sakes. I mean, I guess that goes to show you that even though if you rig the superdelegates in the primary and you have the DNC cheating for you, they cannot take the vote away from the people in the general election, and that's one of the few things that we still have. Oh yeah, but something about the Electoral College, that gets thrown in there too. Well, is YouTube an overwhelmingly conservative domain? I'd say that the followers on YouTube are much more active for the conservatives. And we've given a few reasons why. There's definitely a more dense, followings that the conservative YouTubers have, that the IDW has. And so much of what the progressives have to do to get viewership is to talk about the IDW. They don't really factor in that a lot of people are listening, to Ben Shapiro and to Jordan Peterson and to Stefan Molyneux because other progressive stations are talking about them. Because, that's how they get their views. It's like you want to know what they have to say about Stefan Molyneux or Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or even Joe Rogan if you want to include him into that category. But he's more of just a I guess he sort of has that kind of unpredictable nature. You don't know what side he's always going to take on some issues, so he can't really be lumped in with all of those. But one guy we haven't talked about yet, Dave Rubin. I mean, a lot of the people, whether it's the Young Turks or the progressives, they're really trying to go at Dave Rubin for being supported by the Koch brothers, for trying to just give a platform to certain types of thinking to pollute the internet communities. I mean, that's what they view Dave Rubin as. They view him as a pollutant. And, they view him as someone who's just letting his guests talk no matter what. But in reality, I mean, you really do have to wonder, though, how does something like that get to be so famous? You want to know why? Well, because he's bringing on people from the intellectual dark web, the non-regressive left, to talk about the regressive left. And you know, it's sort of the same formula that the progressives would be using to get their views. They talk about people from the intellectual dark web. I mean, I was listening to the Majority Report, and the host Sam Cedar was talking about how, you know, sometimes people protest Milo being on campus, they protest Ben Shapiro coming on a campus, but no one has ever invited Sam Cedar from the Majority Report to go on a campus to give, you know, a speaking engagement. And it's just like, well, yes, there you go. There you go. I mean, overall, I'd say that YouTube is somewhat of a conservative domain because we only really have a demand for people from the conservative viewpoint. You just can't listen to the progressive talk constantly. You just can't listen, you know, to some of it because, I don't know, it gets kind of monotone, whereas the some of the sort of conservative, IDW, libertarian, whatever sort of thing you would want to say that's that, I guess just saying non-progressive talk, it kind of goes up and down, you know, it's like, it kind of goes, there's a lot of highs and lows that are associated with that. It is very emotionally inducing, but some of the most emotionally inducing things that they have are the debates, like, I mean, especially when they're talking about, you know, well, I mean, most any subject, really, because we're all first-hand, you know, we all have first-hand experience with the subjects that the IDW talks about, like gender, society, traditional roles, expectations, workplace drama. All of us have first-hand experience with all of these things, so we can all relate to it. And when people are discussing it, you know, it's like, sometimes they say something that's very insightful, other times they say things that are kind of like batshit crazy. Yeah, like, why are women wearing makeup in the workplace? Why do they wear lipstick? Why do they put rouge on their cheeks? It must be an invitation. No, I'm going to stop right there before I say something I shouldn't. But, you know, it's like, it's that sort of material that really pulls people in. It's kind of what we said, though, about, you know, the whole Howard Stern thing. Some people like it because they want to listen to it. Other people like it because they just want to know what the person's going to say next. And they want to know what some of the progressives like David Pakman and Kyle Kulinski and Sam Cedar and Cenk Uygur are going to say about them. I mean, there's like, that's how so many things on the Young Turks got their views. Talking about the IDW. Talking about conservatives. That's how the progressives get in on their views. You know, it's like, what do we do with things like the IDW, the intellectual dark web? Are these guys racists? Are these guys white supremacists? What the conclusion that I've kind of come to is, I should also say, are they misogynists? Are they homophobes and Islamophobes? What are they? Well, the conclusion that I've sort of come to is, overall, I'd say that most of them are not white supremacists. However, they definitely serve as sort of that kind of gateway into some things that are more serious. We talked about how the YouTube algorithm makes things more extreme, but just listening to some content, you know, a lot of things in the alt-right, if you want to call it that, or the alt-light, what is that other thing, the new right or something? What was that, Gavin McInnes, or he had some name like that? They benefit from people like Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson because they now have someone who is articulate that is saying things that they can latch onto. Those guys are only about halfway in. They haven't completely crossed the line. I mean, somebody like Ben Shapiro even, he is more of a kind of what you would call a right-of-center liberal. Yes, liberal. Because he'll be saying things like, he doesn't approve of transgender people, that's not really a man, that's not really a woman. Oh yeah, but if I were going out with her, like, on dinner, and, you know, this someone had gender reassignment surgery, I'd call her she if she wanted to. I want to be polite. But, like, you know, it's like, that's a very, very normal thing to say. I mean, okay, yeah, the person wasn't born female, but if you were involved with her in a social engagement, you would call her she, if that's what she wanted to be referred to. I mean, you see what I mean? It's like right-of-center liberal things. And, you know, the same thing that he said to Dave Rubin about how he wouldn't have attended his wedding because he doesn't approve of gay marriage. Oh, yeah, but I'd go to a party at your house and I want to be friends with you. I mean, some kind of right-wing elements, but a lot of things in there are somewhat rather liberal. And then, is the intellectual dark web Islamophobic? Mostly. I mean, you have a few people like Jordan Peterson who actually gave just somewhat of an open thing about Islam. He's like, I don't really know that much about it. I'm not an expert. But, he just kind of gave just a very bland answer. But because Jordan Peterson's also all about belief systems, maps of meaning, you get the idea. He's not really going to turn off anything like that. And then, you have some people who are like Paul Joseph Watson, who just don't really give a fuck, and they're just like no Muslims in America. Yeah, overall, there's a lot of Islamophobia going on there. Anti-Semitism, I don't really think so. Milo, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, even, someone who's not intellectual dark web, but Dennis Prager as well, I don't really think these guys are anti-Semitic. A lot of them are Jewish. But, it's like, it's so weird, because, like, a lot of people in the alt-right are completely anti-Semitic. Jews will not replace us and stuff like that. But then the IDW has such a strong Jewish, just Jewish membership. Like, there's, as I mentioned, Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, that's one of the things that I don't think the right-wingers have ever really sorted out. And they'll be saying things like, in the Vice documentary about the Charlottesville March, they'll be like, yeah, we like Donald Trump, but not Jared Kushner. So they don't really quite know what's going on about, like, their sort of system. I mean, because so many Jews are conservative, I mean, you can find them all up and down the circuit. I mean, I mean like broadcasters. I mean, tune into somebody like Steve Malzberg from time to time. Entertaining debater all the same. Well, that's just coming to a bit of an end on this little rant, this very long, twisted, convoluted rant, this very long-winded